After a while, they grabbed her body and took her body all the way to the corner, and I don't know what else happened with her after that. But all right here, that's what all I seen so far. That's what I see with my own eyes.
Well, let's take you live now to Minneapolis, where we are seeing live pictures now of a memorial being held for the victim. And we know now that we are hearing from a local pastor, we believe. Let's have a listen.
Out now! ICE out now! ICE out now! ICE out now!
ICE has proven itself to be a reckless, incompetent, and incapable completely of respecting human dignity or human rights or the Constitution. And so they must leave the state. The third demand is that we call on Minnesota's congressional delegation and the United States Congress. This is your job. I'll say it again. This is your job. Oversight is not optional. Oversight is not optional. Step in and investigate. Hold DHS, Kristi Noem accountable so that we don't lose another life. Every person listening, I encourage you to contact your congressional leadership and let them know that ICE has no place here. Let them know that this must be investigated and prosecuted. Let them know that the FBI must release the information to the BCA here in Minnesota so that they can do an investigation without federal impediment.
So that is Interfaith Memorial there being held for Renee Good. We obviously have been hearing from various people throughout the day since the incident occurred. We've also heard from the Minneapolis Police Chief, Brian O'Hara, who told the BBC's US partner CBS News that Wednesday's shooting was entirely predictable. Take a listen.
It appears that this woman was not the target of any pre-planned law enforcement investigation, and that the initial reason for approaching the vehicle was because she was blocking the street. So that being in mind, certainly everything that we do in law enforcement, we are trying to be proportionate and reasonable. And ensuring that our officers are having the values that we want them to perform in the street, and using the law, their policy, and training whenever possible.
Let's cross live now and speak to Christopher von Dracek, a Washington correspondent at the Minnesota Star Tribune. It's great to talk to you, Christopher. Thanks so much for joining us on BBC News this evening. And let me just begin by asking you about the events that day, in particular about the investigation. We know now what authorities say happened. We know what witnesses say happened. What more do we know about how this investigation is going to go down?
Correct. And it is sort of a striking, kind of haunting deja vu for a lot of Minnesotans, because obviously just blocks from where Nicole Good was shot and killed yesterday in her vehicle is where George Floyd was killed by a Minneapolis police officer in the summer of 2020. And so that's as a backdrop for everything that's happening. And you heard law enforcement there, local law enforcement, state and city officials, basically on the side of the distressed, frustrated public, which was not the case 6 or sort of 5.5 years ago. And I think what was striking today is we found out that the local law enforcement, the state Bureau of Criminal Apprehension out of St. Paul, the capital, was going to be in a joint investigation to get to the bottom of, whether this use of force by this ICE agent was justified or not. And then midday today, we discovered that, in fact, the FBI, the federal authorities here in DC, that they would actually be taking over that investigation, which I think there's just a sort of yawning gap in terms of trust from many people back in Minnesota that the federal government and this particular Trump administration is up to the task of giving a fair investigation into this woman's killing.
What do you think do we think there'll be any legal route Minnesota officials will take to change this?
Right, that's tough. I actually spoke with, I'll just say a source yesterday, a legal source yesterday, who was floating these names that mean maybe more to an American audience of sort of Ruby Ridge, of this incident many years ago where there was like basically a state and federal distinction in whether or not to prosecute some officials who were active out west. And I think there's a similar kind of confusion that's happening here. You have these layers of government that don't even agree on the basic facts. We have Governor Walz and city officials in Minneapolis referring to this as essentially a brazen rogue killing, right? An unnecessary killing, something that would come close to like a homicide. Or some other kind of, illegal activity. And then in the Oval Office just last night here in D.C., speaking to the New York Times, President Trump, playing the video back and forth, basically said he thought the killing was justified. And so I think it's ambiguous. It's a little chaotic, frankly, right now.
So what next? I mean, we're seeing live pictures now of an interfaith memorial for Renee
Correct.
Good. What next for Minnesota? How does it recover from this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for Minnesota right now, there is a massive push from state officials, and for those who have listened to Governor Walz speak in the last 24 hours, they'll have heard this. There's almost like a begging to not escalate this to the kind of rioting, to the kind of civil disobedience that we saw in the summer of 2020, because that would not just hurt the community, but it also could be a kind of give cause for federal officials to take a larger presence in the city, which they say has already caused this kind of unnecessary, sort of death of this woman to happen. And so I think what is happening right now locally, and sources I've spoken with and our reporters who are on the ground, is there is, again, a concerted effort to avoid the kind of melee that they saw 5.5 years ago. Today in Minneapolis, schools are out. They're actually out Thursday and Friday. And you saw that there are faith leaders taking a very central and public role. And I think that's in some attempt to try to give parameters to this, to allow a kind of structured grieving that perhaps wasn't there in the summer of 2020.
Okay, well, listen, it's been really good to talk to you, Christopher Von Racek. It's been really good to speak to you from the Minnesota Star Tribune. Thank you.